The Dallas Cowboys had a very disappointing 2024 season. However, Jerry Jones has been cooking. So in today's video, let's talk about the Dallas Cowboys and why they are low-key a potential dark horse contender in the 2025-2026 season. Subscribe if you're new and enjoy the video. Let's hop into it. So the way we're going to start this video off is by talking about what moves they made so far this offseason because, like I said, Jerry Jones has kind of been cooking. We'll begin with their free agency, which has kind of been a bit more of an unusually active free agency for the Dallas Cowboys, signing Dante Fowler, bringing in Solomon Thomas, Robert Jones, Peyton Turner, Javonte, Paris, Jack Sanborn, and Miles Sanders. And also making some trades for guys like Kaiir Elam, Kenneth Murray, re-signing a whole bunch of key players, especially that Osa Digazua one. And then most recently, we have the George Pickens deal. Now, I'll get to that George Pickens deal in specifically here in just a little bit, but just in terms of some of their early free agency moves, I thought they did a fine job. This definitely was not the most impressive free agency haul that you could have imagined, but again, this is Jerry Jones we're talking about. This is a guy who very often is very inactive during free agency, and for him to sign about, 8 or 9 players and trade for a handful of guys, I thought that was a really nice move for the Dallas Cowboys. In terms of who's going to be impactful players on this free agency cycle, I do think Dante Fowler will be potentially a starting edge for this team. I also think that Solomon Thomas could get some run, as well as Peyton Turner. In terms of the linebackers, Jack Sanborn will definitely get some run because of course, being with Matt Eberflus. And then I also do think Kenneth Murray will also be potentially a starter. Also, I wouldn't count out Kaiir Elam. I definitely do think there is a potential spot for him on this roster to maybe get some playing time. But in totality, after their early free agency stuff, I wasn't blown away with what Dallas did. I still felt like there was a lot left on the bone for this team to really get better. And then we enter into the 2025 NFL draft, and I thought the Dallas Cowboys had one of, if not the best draft classes of the 2025 class. Because in round 1, they took Tyler Booker. Now, admittedly speaking, I was not the biggest fan of this pick. However, they took Donovan Ezeraku, Savon Ravel in the 2nd and 3rd round, and I completely love those picks. And then to finish off the class, you bring in a backup running back in Jaden Blue, who could potentially compete for a starting job, Shamar James, Arjani Cornelius, Jay, Phil Maffa, and a defense tackle from Maryland. Again, as I mentioned, I was not the biggest fan of the Tyler Booker pick. I did not think that he was worthy of a top 16 pick. I felt more confident with him in the back end of round 1, early round 2, just because I don't think he's athletic enough to be taken, especially at the guard position, as a top 16 pick. With that said, he is a great leader in terms of a gap scheme, man-on-man run blocker, and pass protector. He's really solid. And from what I have heard, it does sound like the Dallas Cowboys are going to transition into a bit more of a gap scheme system, but I'm sure they'll also have to do some zone stuff as well. So we will see how Tyler Booker adjusts to that. Now, Booker will be your full-time starter. So in terms of just getting a guy who's guaranteed to get a starting job, I think check mark, you got the job done. This Tyler Booker pick also does kind of solidify your young offensive line for the future. Guyton, Tyler Smith, and now Tyler Booker. You got 3 potential long-term answers at your different positions, not to mention Cooper Beebe at center had a good rookie year, and we will of course see about Terrence Steele. In round 2, Donovan Ezeraku was just great value. I definitely thought that he was worthy of an early 2nd to late 1st round pick. He fell right in the middle to the Dallas Cowboys at pick 44, and look, there's not a more refined pass rusher today than Donovan Ezeraku. Like, even Abdul Carter, as refined as he is, I would say that Ezeraku might be a smidge more refined, or maybe just like right there with him. Now, Donovan is not the athlete that Abdul Carter is. He's definitely not the greatest athlete in this year's draft class, but he just has a variety of pass rush moves. He knows how to get to the quarterback. He's a constant disruptor, and with this Dallas Cowboys team, you pair him up with Micah Parsons, Dante Fowler, Marshawn Nealon, and Sam Williams, and he's not going to be asked to be the guy, but rather the 2nd guy next to, of course, Micah Parsons, which I think is a perfect role for Ezeraku to succeed in. And then round 3, Savon Ravel. I was a huge fan of this pick. Savon Ravel to me was pre-ACL injury, a potential 1st or early 2nd round pick. Of course, he has the ACL injury, and he ultimately falls to round 3. I do believe that that is a bit concerning, granted, because I just think the talent is so much there that if the medicals were to not check out, then that's maybe why he fell to round 3. However, the Dallas Cowboys team doctor, I believe, was the one that did the surgery and was working with Savon Ravel. So I'm at least optimistic about that. In terms of what his fit will be with the Cowboys, I don't actually know how it's going to work, but I could see a world where Savon Ravel pushes for a starting job early and potentially kind of pulls the Cowboys' hands to maybe cut or trade Trevon Diggs, maybe next year or sometime this year, I'm not sure. And also with DeRon Bland's contract up after this year, maybe a guy like Ravel could take his spot as well. In totality, I look at the first 3 picks and I think, man, you got 3 potential starters. Tyler Booker is going to start for you. Donovan Ezraku will be a long-term starter for you. And Savone Ravel at some point will probably take over one of the cornerback spots. And hell, he might even start week 1 at this point. Now, I didn't love their day 3. I thought that there was some more talent on the board that they ultimately passed up on. But the Jaden Blue pick at 149 should be a fun one. This dude is an absolute track star, like an absolute burner on the field. Just watch some of those plays against Clemson with all that talent on Clemson's roster, and Jaden Blue is just simply outrunning those dudes so often. The thing that kind of held Jaden Blue back at Texas was the fact that he had a very serious fumbling issue, and he's just not a big bruisey style running back, which Texas sometimes likes to lean towards. But with the Dallas Cowboys, you already have Javonte, you brought in Miles Sanders, you also drafted Phil Maffa, which I like that pick. And I think Jaden Blue could end up kind of being that Tony Pollard-esque running back that this team hasn't had since like 2020, 2021. He's not going to get 20 carries a game, but for 10 to 12 to 15 carries a week, not to mention work in the pass game, within screens, he's going to get a lot of productivity and a lot of chances to make some big plays, and that's kind of what this Dallas Cowboys team needed. Outside of Jaden Blue and the rest of day 3, I like the Jay Toa pick. I think that's how you say his name. Don't quote me on that. He's just a really big run stuffer who you want to put on first down and then take him off the field as a pass rusher because he doesn't give you much as a pass rusher, but as a pure just fat boy up the middle who's going to stuff the run and fill gaps, that's what Jay will do. Shamar James, I think, starts off on special teams and will likely, hopefully, develop into maybe becoming a linebacker on this team. We'll see, but for sure he'll be on special teams. Ajani Cornelius will need to develop. He needs to give more time. But unfortunately, I don't know if he's the highest upside guy. I think there are some other guys on the board, like a Cameron Williams for Texas, who I thought maybe, I'm not sure if he was available, by the way, but if he was, I thought he was a higher upside guy. Ajani Cornelius, though, will likely be their backup tackle and maybe develop to become, I don't know, the replacement for Terrence Steele if, of course, things go perfectly. Phil Maffa in round 7, again, as I alluded to earlier, I do like this guy. He's a bit more of a bruisier style guy for Clemson who kind of took the load a lot last year. I think you pair him with Jaden Blue, that could be a fun little duo if it, of course, works out. So just in totality, I love this Dallas Cowboys draft class, like a really talented class with a lot of really good pieces and a lot of impactful guys. So then after the draft was over, we got some reports that the Dallas Cowboys were working on a few trades. Now, I do want to briefly cover one trade that hasn't happened yet, but I have heard some potential rumblings of it potentially being made, and that was a trade for Breece Hall. Listen, if that trade does get done, then I really like what the Dallas Cowboys have done this offseason. Of course, he is probably going to be due for a contract soon. He's a little bit older, a little bit more injury prone, but man, he's a good player. And I think if the Cowboys could get him on this roster for at least 1 or 2 years, it could end up working out quite nicely. But the big news that broke super early in the morning, it happened at like 5 a.m. local time, George Pickens, Dallas Cowboys. Now, I don't know 100% what the compensation is. I'm recording this pretty early, but I do believe that it is a 3rd and I want to say a 7th or a 6th round pick or maybe a 5th round pick in 2027. In return, the Cowboys get Pickens and a future pick in 2027 as well. I'll throw the compensation up. I'll have more details when I get there. But yeah, I really like this move for the Dallas Cowboys. I have been hammering the idea that the Dallas Cowboys' biggest need has consistently been the fact they have not had a second option to go to outside of CeeDee Lamb. They tried it with Brandon Cooks. They tried it with Michael Gallup. It worked with Amari Cooper, and since then, it's really been a struggle. And I personally believe that George Pickens is like the perfect receiver to put next to CeeDee Lamb. CeeDee Lamb can do a lot in the slot. He can do a lot underneath. He can do a lot in the screen game. He also can win downfield. He's just a complete receiver. But man, George Pickens on the outside as just a long, lengthy, athletic as hell receiver who, for whatever reason, 50-50 balls are not 50-50 balls with George Pickens. They're more like 75-25. And I also think there's a lot more to still unlock with him as a player. I think if he truly does want to get to a point where he's one of the best receivers in the NFL and earn top receiver money, if he learns a thing or two from CeeDee Lamb in terms of route running and how to win underneath, then man, this is really going to be a guy who can really develop nicely alongside CeeDee Lamb. And for the Dallas Cowboys, it's kind of a low-risk move. Now, granted, you did give up a 3rd-round pick, which, if it doesn't work out, could end up kind of sucking, especially because he is due for a contract after the season's over. So I think the Dallas Cowboys are likely going to wait on a contract extension to see how this sort of thing works out. If it works out, they'll give him a contract at the end of the season. If it doesn't work out, then I guess you just kind of wasted a 3rd-round pick for 1 year. That would kind of suck, but I'm going to assume it is going to work out. I think this move absolutely makes the Dallas Cowboys offense significantly better. Again, there isn't a better complement to a guy who could play within the slot and be just a versatile piece than a true outside receiver who can just win deep. And the Cowboys haven't had this style of guy since like Dez Bryant. And I'm not saying he's going to be Dez Bryant, but in terms of like a guy who can win those 50-50 balls, can bring some swag or some energy to the locker room. That's what George Pickens will do. Now, I know there's a lot of character concerns with the guy, and of course, with any player that has character concerns, that's always going to be a serious issue that the coaching staff and the front office will have to work with. But I kind of felt like this Cowboys team kind of needed that guy on this roster, that crash out guy who's just a little bit, I don't know, messed up in the head. And that's what George Pickens kind of is. At times it can be kind of annoying because he can be sometimes a little immature and, I don't know, say things on Instagram or do things that are just silly and brings drama for no reason. But this Cowboys team, like, they already have good culture and good leadership and Dak and Micah and all those guys. So I'm not too worried about it. And then you throw in a guy like George Pickens who can just bring the moxie, bring the energy, create big splashy highlight plays, and really just, man, when Dak Prescott's in a pinch and just has to throw the ball up, he's going to have a button that just says, F it, George Pickens is down there somewhere, and he's just going to lay the ball up. And for however many times, Pickens will probably make a play. So now we look at the Dallas Cowboys depth chart, and I think this team is significantly better and also significantly deeper than last year. If you look back at the 2024 season, the Dallas Cowboys were littered with injuries. But this year, they're pretty, I don't know, deep in a lot of positions. We'll start off with the offense. I did not mention Joe Milton, but Joe Milton is now the backup quarterback. We will see if he gets playing time this year. I would not be shocked because Dak has missed a lot of times these past couple years. So if you're Joe Milton, stay ready. You're going to get an opportunity potentially, and it could be really nice for you. The running back room is basically all brand new bodies. I'm not sure if Javonte will start. I'm also kind of hopeful he isn't going to start, but we'll have to wait and see on that one. But Miles Sanders, I think, will be a camp body that maybe makes the roster if things go well. Jaden Blue will make the team, and we'll see about Phil Maffa. Receiving core-wise, I feel really, really good about Lamb, Pickens, and Tolbert now. You also pair that with Jonathan Mingo, who can kind of be a bit of a weapon in multiple ways, and Kevontae Turpin, who's just an absolute speedster, not to mention Paris Campbell you signed. And I'm also kind of hoping for Trayshawn Holden, their undrafted free agent, to get some run too. And we talked about the offensive line a bit earlier, but this is kind of an unproven unit with a lot of younger guys who have limited production. Guyton had a really rough rookie season where I think he led the team or led the league in penalties in his rookie year, and that was on limited playing time in the first place. So hopefully he can develop. That would be really nice for this Dallas Cowboys team. And you also bring in Tyler Smith from a couple years ago, and he's been a superstar. Cooper Beebe has been good, at least in his rookie year. We'll see if he can continue to develop. Tyler Booker looks to be sort of a leadership guy on this offensive line, that guy that can take the flag and run with it as this team's like superstar guard. He's going to be the Zach Martin replacement, which is a very tall task to replace, but I do think he has the potential to be a really good player. Again, very strong. When he gets his hands on you, you're not moving. But if you can get outside of his frame, if you can get him moving, that's where you're going to see the flaws of his game. So we will see if that pick ends up working out. Then Terrence Steele is still at right tackle, to all the Dallas Cowboys fans' displeasure. He's somebody that Cowboys fans are not the biggest fan of, and frankly, I understand. He can be very inconsistent. And then on the defensive side of things, your defensive line looks a lot better on paper. Dante Fowler, Osa Digizua, Micah Parsons, maybe Mozzie Smith. I mean, he has not worked out so far, and that could be a low point, but Solomon Thomas, you bring in Jay. There's some different pieces here. It's a new room now, and you're just hoping that Mozzie Smith takes that step forward. But man, you look at the edge rushing room, and I think they're 3 deep on both sides. Like, if Peyton Turner can stay healthy, I think that he might be one of those first-round busts that could end up kind of playing back into having a solid career. But Dante Fowler had, I think, like 10 sacks last year, and Donovan Ezeraku, I think, will be a good pass rusher. Thielen last year showed flashes in limited playing time as a rookie, and Sam Williams has shown glimpses of really being an awesome player. Unfortunately, had a bad year last year because of an injury, which was unfortunate. And then the linebacking core, you're pretty deep there as well. You're also praying to God that DeMarvin Overshown comes back at some point next year. But even if he can't come back until like super late in the year, you have Kenneth Murray, you have Morris Leofau, you have Jack Sanborn. Obviously, still have Damone Clark, who at one point was a starter for this team, and Shamar James was your 5th round pick, who maybe could end up playing a role for himself. Then your cornerback room, admittedly speaking, it's going to be a little questionable how they work this actual unit out in terms of where does Ravel kind of fit in here. Because Deron Bland and Trevon have kind of locked up the 2 outside corner spots. I don't really know if Ravel works as a like nickel or slot guy, like that Jordan Lewis replacement. So right now, ESPN will say that Kyer Elam is the starter, and maybe that could end up working out. I know he's had some good games and some bad moments, so we'll keep an eye out on that one. I think worst case scenario, you stick in Ravel at outside linebacker, you kick Deron Bland back into sort of a nickel role. I think that could work out. I think there's also some depth here too. Kalen Carson, Andrew Booth, and Josh Butler pre-injury looked pretty good last year. So there is some depth there. Admittedly speaking, I do think the safeties are not a bright spot on this team. I like Malik Hooker. He's a good player, but Donovan Wilson had a really up and down season last year. So if that is the case, would not be shocked if they maybe move one of these corners into a safety role. Like I could see Siobhan Ravel playing safety and actually being really good at it. So let's answer the question. Are the Dallas Cowboys contenders in 2025? Well, let me make my case here. No, I don't think they're going to be championship contenders from day one. But a team that went 7-10 last year with all the injuries they had, and I look at the rest of the NFC, I think this team could be one of those underrated teams that maybe can get in there. I want to reiterate, dark horse contender. Not saying they're going to be a favorite, not going to say they will be a contender. I'm saying they're a dark horse contender, meaning that I think they have a shot at it. Because you look at the rest of the NFC East is pretty stacked. The Philadelphia Eagles obviously won the Super Bowl last year. You expect them to be right back in the mix of it this upcoming season. The Commanders will also be in the mix of it, assuming that there's no sophomore slump for Jaden Daniels, which I'm not going to predict. And then the New York Giants. If Jackson Dart really works out for this team, they have a really complete roster that can compete with anybody. So I think they could contend this year too. Maybe not for a championship, but maybe a late wild card push if it does work out. The NFC North, I mean, you can't count on any of those teams because the Chicago Bears look really good on paper. The Detroit Lions will be back in contention. The Packers will be there as well. And of course, if JJ McCarthy works out for Minnesota, that'll be a good team as well. In the NFC South, I think the Falcons will be playoff contenders, and I think the same for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Plus, you kind of can't sleep on the Carolina Panthers no more. They kind of have a good roster going over there. And then NFC West, I could see all four of those teams being playoff contenders. Like the Arizona Cardinals, to me, are one of the more underrated rosters in the NFL with Kyler Murray, Marvin Harrison Jr., a lot of great pieces there. So Arizona could easily be in the thick of it. LA Rams are one of my favorites to win the whole thing, so I think they'll be in there. You can't count out San Francisco, and then Seattle as well has a really good roster that might just take a little bit of some time to mesh and get chemistry together, but there's some good players on that roster too. So it's going to be a tough task for the Dallas Cowboys to actually become contenders in this division, in this conference, but when you get Dak Prescott, when you got CeeDee Lamb, when you add in a George Pickens, you add in an offensive line that looks better on paper and should be better from last year because of health and just development, and then Micah Parsons, Trevon Diggs, and all the superstars over there. This is a team that has the capability to get the job done. Now, one thing I have not talked about is the Brian Schottenheimer side of things. Now, I will say this. Everything that I have heard this offseason has been really good from Brian Schottenheimer in terms of him building a culture, talking about what his game plan is going to be, this, and that. I've liked what I've heard from him, but at the same time, I've liked what I've heard from McCarthy. I like what I heard from Jason Garrett. And it didn't work out for those guys, although they had some success at certain points. And frankly, I was never a big fan of the Schottenheimer hire at all. I always thought it was a very Dallas Cowboys-like move to hire somebody within who's going to just be a mid to okay head coach. I do worry that the Dallas Cowboys will consistently be at a coaching disadvantage, and I think with this roster, that kind of does suck, because if you're looking at other teams out there, like I'm taking Ben Johnson. In fact, I'm probably taking like every single coach in the NFC over Schottenheimer right now. Of course, we'll see if that ends up being true when the season starts. It's kind of difficult to see this Cowboys team actually getting there with this coaching staff, but I like the Matt Eberflus move. I think he's a great defensive mind that can really bring this Cowboys team defensively together. And if the offense can be really good next year, if they can put up some points, this team is going to be competitive. And I think they're going to be a team that, I don't know, I could see them potentially making the playoffs and maybe making on a deep playoff run, because I think this Cowboys team, like, they fixed a lot of their major issues. And with an awesome draft and a free agency where they were unusually a bit more aggressive, I think this Cowboys team looks a lot better on paper. But you guys, let me know in the comment section below, what are your thoughts on the Dallas Cowboys? Will they be making the playoffs in 2025? And are they dark horse contenders? You guys let me know in the comment section below. And if you enjoyed, hit the like and subscribe button. Love you guys. Peace.